Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Now today I'm speaking with Nick Coley. Nick, welcome to the Sports Psych Show.
Hi Dan, thanks for having me here.
Well, we've been talking for some time about you coming on and having a chat. It would be great to get you introducing yourself to the Sports Psych Show audience. Tell us about who you are, what you're doing, and what's going on in your life.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Nick. I'm currently working. My role is head of learning development at Evans Cycles, a bicycle retailer. There's a big link there because I've been a cyclist since the early 90s, mountain biking, more of the sort of cross-country racing. So that's been a passion of mine for, since mid-90s. I think I got into it there. Raced as a junior at a sort of international level, but never really sort of made the cut. Continued riding and racing, but I suppose it's progressed and changed slightly into more of the longer endurance racing, so 100-mile races or 12, 24-hour races as well. And then that has sort of brought me back. I studied back in 2000. I did a degree in psychology and sports science, and have obviously used some of the psychology stuff back in my role head of L&D, and then through my racing, I've kind of self-discovered actually the benefit of the sort of psychology side of things, and that's brought me back in, and now I'm studying a master's degree in sports psychology. So that's sort of where we're up to now, and I'm midway through that on a part-time basis.
Fantastic. So you've got this awesome combination of doing your master's degree in sports psychology, you're competing as a cyclist, and your day job is head of learning and development at an organisation. So some real soft skills running through your various day-to-day activities.
Yeah, definitely. And I never would have thought, even going back 12 months when I started my master's degree, how much of that and what we're covering off, how I'm sitting there thinking, I see the benefit and how this would work if I'm got a 12-hour race or a whatever race going on. But then on the other side, I'm like, hang on a minute, this stuff I can literally go back tomorrow and use it with my team, or use it. So that I never would have expected that, and it's been a very interesting shift of direction, shall we say.
Absolutely. Well, look, it'll be interesting to talk about some of the relationships between sports psychology techniques, and your day-to-day functioning as head of learning and development at Evans Cycles. But let's talk a bit first about the competitive cycling that you're doing. It sounded to me, I think I picked up there from your introduction, that you've gone from short distances to long distances in endurance cycling. Would that be right?
Yeah. So cross-country mountain biking has taken a big change. When it used to be that the races were anywhere up to sort of 2.5 hours long, so fairly long distance. And then since it went into the Olympics, the discipline's now called cross-country Olympic discipline, and that is a max of 1.5 hours, super short course, really technical. They come in and out of the arena, so from a spectator's point of view, it's fantastic, and it's very much like just flat out, really hard 1.5 hours. And as I've got older, I've realised that that wasn't necessarily my thing, and I preferred it when the races got to a longer duration and distance. And then that's led me on to a category of mountain bike racing now called marathon. So that's anything above, I think, 60 kilometres, but no more than 180. So no more than 100 miles. So these races don't tend to happen as much in the UK just because there's not enough space. Okay. But in Europe, they're huge. And I've sort of done a few of those over in Belgium and everything. And then that sort of, it led me on to the 100-mile and then the 24-hour ones, which are a whole different beast.
I was going to say the word enjoyment and long-distance cycling. I'm not too sure if they go hand in hand. I mean, that's so. How long have you been quite sadistic then?
I've been a bit of a nutcase for. I mean, I did my first 24-hour race as a team back in it must be 2005, 2006. And you've got a team of 4 and you basically pass the baton. You've got 24 hours to do as many laps as you can. And you're talking about a lap that takes anywhere from half an hour to 45 minutes. That's got its own set of stress because you go out flat out, you come back, you chill out for an hour and a half, you go out again, you've got to keep turning that on and off, on and off. And you can't really sleep because if you miss your changeover, there's that pressure. And what I found is if you go and do it solo, which sounds even more bonkers, you're just responsible for yourself with that. So you'll everything with team aspect of stuff, when you've got that team environment and it's very it appears more high pressure because you're going out, it's super fast, you come back, there's the changeover, you've got to come back to where your team is set up, relax, have something to eat, keep warm, make sure that you know how long the next person's going and the next person's going so you can work out when you're next going to go out, have you got time for sleep and all this sort of stuff. Whereas when you're on your own, you just keep going until you can't go any further.
That's really interesting, actually, because you would have thought when you're on your own, there would be a greater psychological burden on you. But what I hear you say is actually feeling responsible for your own individual performance with relation to your teammates and feeling that you want to positively influence your teammates. Mm-hmm. That sounds like it's actually more burdensome, is perhaps what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. And that's not to say, actually, when you do the solo one, you've got 24 hours inside your own head, and you've got to the point where, if I say to you, what were you doing this time yesterday, and you've got to ride a bike from then until now, you go at a much slower pace. It's more, how long can you go for when everything in your body's saying, I think it's time for bed, Nick. You're like, I need to do another lap. Like, let's keep going. And it's dark, it's pitch black. And that in itself is a completely different set of stressors, if you like, or pressure. I find that easier to deal with than the team one, because there almost is no time to relax. And if you do sleep, how long can you sleep for? And you're trying to work out, everyone's lap times change. So as it gets through the night, lap times are changing, and then you're trying to work out actually how long have we got until the next person goes out, and you're tired. So that becomes even harder. So you're right, it's completely different.
It's fascinating because, I get so many people say to me within, say, the world of football, soccer, that I work quite heavily in, and they'll go, you might think football's psychological, but those guys and girls who play individual sports, and obviously I was one of them, having been a pro golfer, but those guys and girls who play individual sports, that's really psychologically hard. And I sort of scratch my head and I go, look, it is, because you are in charge, you're responsible, and there's a whole raft of things that you've got to be responsible for, and you've got to take charge. However, when you've got a squad of 25 players, or a squad of 30 players, or a team of 11 players with a few subs, or whatever team sport it is, then that it's challenging to be a great teammate, to lead others, to deliver on togetherness. So I think it's a fascinating thing, and both have their challenges, don't they?
Yeah, they do completely. And what's really interesting is it's not. Well, I've obviously alluded to the fact that I found the team one more of a stressful environment than the individual one. But actually, people find like one they'll be way more comfortable with than the other, and vice versa. And they are so different, but so similar because of the things that you might apply might cross over. But it fascinated me how different it is. And it didn't help that one year we did one, I miscalculated a changeover, and that lost us a place off the podium, and like it literally just stays in my mind really that then added more pressure every time we went. I'm like, oh my god, we need to have this whiteboard up, we're going to write all of our lap times down so we can see when we need to be, like, and it all of a sudden we're taking a whiteboard and marker pens into the middle of a field to a bike race. It was weird, but stressful for me.
Well, that's a really interesting dynamic, isn't it? In as much as you've you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
You feel in your own mind responsible, culpable, and so subsequently the volume of anxiety, neuroticism, if you like, has turned up in your own mind and through your body, and so you go, okay, right, guys, so that doesn't happen again. We need to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. Yeah. And then you've probably got your teammates, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 other guys who are going, well, hang on a minute, actually that doesn't suit me, or us.
Yeah, and luckily
they were okay about it.
They all appreciated it because it meant they had to think less. Okay. Like there was less sort of cognitive process when they're trying to chill out, and they're like, well, he took 43 minutes, he was 38, and I can't really add up because I'm knackered. So luckily, it did work out actually.
Good teammates.
Yeah, thank God.
Perfect. Well, look, fascinating stuff, and I know that you, as an individual, you entered something called the Leadville 100, and not being, I think we're going back to around 2013, 2014, and not being an expert in long-distance cycling, this is something I hadn't heard of. But you pointed me in the direction of a blog that you wrote, and you wrote about this first appearance in the Leadville 100. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Leadville 100 is, your preparations for that experience, and how it all went.
Yeah, so Leadville, little mining town in Colorado, I can't remember when it was, maybe back in the 80s or whatever. The mine shut down, the town literally turned into a ghost town, and this guy called Ken Klober was like, well, how do we get people back into the town? How do we bring some revenue in? And they thought of a running race. And he said, well, if we do a marathon, they'll only be here for the day. So let's do a 100-mile race, and they'll have to stay overnight. So it's actually in its, I don't know, 20th, 30-something years they've been doing it. And the 100-mile run is this weekend. And it's an out and back. It's all above 10,000 feet, which is 3,000 meters above sea level. So the air's super thin, and since that running race, they've evolved a mountain bike one the week before, so it was last weekend. You enter into a lottery. I've tried to enter into it a few times. Finally got a spot. I was like, this is amazing. I'm gonna actually really, really sort of train for this. So I've got a coach, had a training plan, was doing all that. Started really gazing into numbers and data, and saw the numbers going up. I was like, it's fantastic. There are 2 cut-offs for the race. You have to do it within 12 hours to be a finisher. But if you do it, what I thought, under 10, you get, there's these 2 belt buckles you get, and they're fairly sizable. Not sort of thing you'd ever wear in the UK, but it's a proper sort of American belt buckle. So if you get under 10, you get the bigger golden one. So I was like, I might be able to get under 10. And anyway, 2 months before, I realised it wasn't 10 hours, it's under 9 hours. So I was like, right, I just sort of got to the point where I thought I could do 10, and then it's 9. And you get so fixated on this one thing. Really, what I should have been doing is going, actually, I just want to go out and see what it's like and enjoy it. But I got so fixated by that, trained harder, then obviously did the recovery thing, flew out to Colorado. Everything was great. Did the race. My parents came out. My girlfriend came out. It was sort of quite a big deal, really. And got 9 hours 14, 9 hours 15. Right. Literally didn't really eat. Completely blew up. Ran out of energy. Sort of, I don't know. It seems like 10, 12 miles from the finish, but it was a long way out. So then it was like, right, I know what I can do to get under 9 hours. I've just got to go back. I've got to make sure I eat properly. I'll train harder. I'll be fitter. It'll be fine. Fast forward to the next year, I was probably, the numbers were 10 to 15% better. So I was way, way fitter than I was. I've worked out my nutrition plan. And to cut a long story short, I invested everything, financially, time and everything into it. And I came in half an hour slower.
Wow.
Which was the first. It's really interesting because, like, going back to the psychology thing, I've gone through obviously going for a master's and stuff, and I've looked back now and realised that when I was younger, I had a massive fear of failure, to the point where I would rather not put everything into it because then I can say, well, I could have done that, but I just didn't put my all in because I was so worried that if I put everything in, I wouldn't have been good enough. So this was the first time that I invested everything into something and like literally went all in with everything, because it costs about $1,000 to fly out there. It's a whole year of training, of sacrifice, not going out, all this sort of stuff. You know, it's by no means pro, but an insight into the sacrifice that they kind of have to give. And I can literally remember being in my bedroom at the hotel by the finish. My parents had come out again. I'd gone upstairs, phoned the girlfriend, and I was literally like so upset. So upset that I'd invested everything into it. And I was like, I need to really look at this, because I thought I'd done everything. I thought I'd prepared in every way I could, and clearly I didn't. And that following year, I went back and I did a full-on like reflective like analysis of everything. And I was like, what haven't I looked at? And I was sort of chatting to my mum, and she was like, oh yeah, you just seemed like really anxious and stressed on the start line. I was like, I thought I was all right. And basically went back and then looked more at actually what was my mindset going into that, what was my self-talk, like all of these things. I sort of started to research, and I was like, actually, let's try it. Let's try it in training. Let's try and practice. Let's try it in a few races. And I found it had a huge impact on me. And so, I kind of came back the third year, wasn't as fit as either of the other 2 years physically, but I was in a completely different place. And even my mum was like, how you were on those two start lines, those 2 years were like two different people. And I came in 40 minutes under the previous time. So that was like a light bulb moment to me. I was like, oh, hang on a minute. If you not only train your body, but train your mind, like the difference is huge. Even on that sort of, I say I sort of trained it. It wasn't as if I was going full in on everything. I wasn't a professional. I had a day job, all these other things. So it was just a small insight into the difference it can make. And it really opened my eyes to it, shall we say.
Fascinating. And in line with the notion that success and failure leave clues, it's really interesting what you say about what your mother saw, what she witnessed in terms of how you looked behaviourally on the start line in year 2 and year 3. So what specifically do you think she saw that was different?
How she says it is, and because I didn't think I looked that different between the two, but she said that I held my body differently, and that I appeared more tense in the second year. The third year, I stood around. I held my body differently. I appeared a lot more calm yet focused. And I think I'd sort of started to change how, like, I remember in the second year being, I need to make sure I don't come in over 9 hours. So my focus was on making sure I don't do that, not actually, why don't you, like, this is what you need to do to be able to achieve that. So focus on that. So I had an idea of exactly when I need to eat, exactly when I need to drink, exactly where, when I get to there, I need to be doing this, but I'm not thinking about that yet because this stretch is in front of me. So I was focusing on the task in hand, not, I need to make sure I avoid that or don't do that. So that I can remember being at the start line, kind of focusing on those things and being a bit more confident in my preparation. Like, I've done all the hard work. Now I just need to go out and do what I've been training for, which was completely new to me, really. And so I think from what it sounds like, I was holding my body differently. My body language said so much that I thought there wasn't any difference, really. And she's like, yeah, it was a massive... And she, to the point where she goes on about it quite a lot. And it made me realise. So I kind of asked her about it. And she was like, yeah, you just held your body differently. Your attitude and your conversation was different. You were way more calm and just relaxed, and it almost like you knew what you needed to do and you're just going to go and do it. And at the same time, a bit happier, which showed through as well. So, Yeah, clearly I can't hide these things as well as I thought I could.
Not as good an actor as you thought.
No, not at all.
Interesting. Let's strip this back a little bit, because I think this is going to be of interest to the audience. So going into year 2, so you'd failed to go under this magic mark of 9 hours and win your belt in year 1. It had been an exhausting experience, and just reading about it exhausted me. I have to say, I had to go and have a lie down, which probably shows how unfit I am. So going into, so after that, it was almost like you turned up the volume of determination. Right, I'm going to go and beat this 9 hours, and your overarching strategy sounded like the normal physical approach. Nutrition, great, absolutely vital, important. Physical fitness, clearly very, very important. And going down that path and everything associated with those things from a very, very narrow perspective. And so you turned up, as you say, with your key KPIs, your key performance indicators, if you like, better, the markers better. But it sounds like you were trying to avoid going over 9 hours rather than having the kind of the psychological attributes that were going to help you focus on the things that you've got to do to get under 9 hours, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair sort of summary of where you were going into that second race?
Yes. Yeah, completely. And it was weird. I can remember going up to that second year and being like, like, I'm fitter, I'm faster, blah, blah, and all these things. And it's almost like the moment I arrived in the town 2 days before, I was like, oh my God, I really hope I don't balls this up. I really hope I don't go over 9 hours. And, your mind just goes with that. And it held on to it for the days I was there. And I tried to sort of like go, no, I'll be fine. But it would always come back, and it would always come back. And because I let that, my mind was free to do what it wanted at that sort of point. So it kind of just ran with it, and it built and built. And then when I was on the start line, clearly it was like, Nick, don't balls this up. You've trained a lot harder. Like, you've invested a lot of money in this. Your parents will come out again. All of these things. And literally the wheels fell off again. I had horrendous cramp. Oh God, it was horrible. Some guy handed me this. Remember these, like, those popsicles you can get? It was basically like liquid pickle juice, and I was in such a mess. I was like, give me anything you got. He goes, it'll help with cramp. I was like, this is amazing. It was bad. So
right, okay. So let's try and strip back, because I think it's important to strive to get as much detail as we can. So you completed that second race in half an hour. You were half an hour slower, and you obviously absolutely gutted, absolutely devastated, and went home and started to go, okay, there has to be another way here. So when, I suppose, when did the penny drop in terms of the psychological aspect? Was it something you had read? Was it just when you were ruminating about it? Was it, what was it? And then what did that specifically lead to in terms of you changing psychologically?
So interestingly, and I thought about this the other day, what was the actual trigger? And I can remember being in my hotel room, phoning the girlfriend, like really, really upset about it. Felt like a bit of a failure and all of these sorts of things. And then it was almost by the time I got home, I realised how different I felt about it, because I'd kind of let it digest and fester a little bit, and then by the time I got home I was like, right, let's really look at what happened in that race. Let's go through it bit by bit, look at each of the sections. What did I look like? What was it like for me then? How did I feel? What was going through my head? All of these sorts of things. And I've still got the thing that I wrote it all down, and you just see all of these patterns emerging. You're like, hang on a minute, like look at what I'm thinking at all of these points, and it's not everything you remember, but a lot of the things are just really negative. Like, come on, don't, you're doing a better time, but don't get any slower. Like, not actually, you're doing a good time, keep going at this, let's look at the next thing we need to work towards. That don't balls it up, Nick, always kept coming back, and you just see these patterns emerging. I was like, well, I feel differently to I did back in that hotel room, because now I want to go at this again. So clearly my mind state's changed. So what if I can do something to keep this mindset and this determination and avoid these things? And that was sort of the trigger, if you like. And I'd remembered a lot of the stuff from my degree, because one thing I'd found is that over time I'd used my sports science degree less and my psychology one more and more with my role at Evans. So I kind of was actually, let me maybe look into some of this, dig some of the old books out, and it kind of evolved from there, really.
Interesting. So what I hear you say is that when you came back and you started to think about it, you were engaging in self-reflection, which is a very important self-skill. That increased your self-awareness. So
yep.
self-reflection, self-awareness, and as you went through this process, you became aware of, oh wow, I was really negative there, and I wasn't focusing on the task, or I didn't have a specific task here, and my body language was really tight and tense, and okay, right, this makes sense now. I was quite negative. I was quite flat. I wasn't prepared psychologically, and I didn't necessarily have a psychological framework to be able to perform under pressure. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yes, yeah, completely. And like a lot of things, then you'll sort of search out more evidence. So I'd search out, I went down the route of self-talk was one of them, because obviously there's a lot of stuff that goes on in your head. So I was like, right, actually, this is always quite negative. Let me see if I can use some, try some things out in training and try and reframe some of the things I say to myself. And then I started to work on like a bit more on focus, and went down, tried out some mindfulness stuff, and then said, how can I apply that to like a bike ride or a training session? And I kind of found that the ones that were really successful prior to this had been the ones where I was completely focused on what I had to do, and I wasn't thinking about the next interval or the next thing, or oh my god, it's going to get worse and worse. I was like, well, hang on a minute, let's just focus on this one now, get through that, then the next one, then the next one. And I started to try these things out, and with not a huge amount of practice, found like a slight change. So I kind of just built on that, really, and then it applied in other aspects as well, like getting into a big meeting or having to present a town hall meeting in front of people at work, or a new session that I'm running for the first time, and all of these things. I was like, well, let's try them in this situation, let's try them in that situation. And I always found the focus thing, like on task in hand, and you hear it all the time, and then you apply it and you're like, actually that does work. Wow, who'd have thought?
Absolutely. So after this period of self-reflection, building the self-awareness, you engaged in improving your capacity to talk to yourself in a manner that is more positive, so it sustains your effort, and with relation to focus of attention, it's staying more on task, so not getting too far ahead of yourself into the latter parts of the races and thinking, oh no, I've got this ahead and that ahead. Focusing on the present moment. And I like what you said. There's a couple of little really good clues there about what you said in terms of, well, I engaged in some mindfulness, but searched for ways that I could utilize mindfulness while on my bike, rather than just, I'm going to do mindfulness and kind of believing that engaging in mindfulness at home is going to improve my cycling. You are actually like, okay, I'm experiencing this period of being mindful. How can I utilize that on my bike? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose when you're training for longer, like 100-mile races, so you're on your bike for over 9 hours. The time I was doing it out there, you've got a hell of a lot of time with yourself, and that sometimes monotony and boredom, especially if you're out on a training ride and it's the same routes you use. It's very easy for your mind to wander off. So actually bringing it back and going, right, let me see if from this section to this section, I can just be present, and I can be engaged in what's actually happening. So, to start with, it would be like half a mile or something like that. And then it would be from this road to this road. And it's weird. I'd find myself really, really focusing and be like, I need to relax now, let my mind just wander and do its thing. So you've almost got this near on identical feeling to doing a physical interval, like really, really hard. Let's recover and relax. And you'd almost do that with your mind, and you find that you can go longer and longer and longer, and you're more present in the task in hand. So just things like, I look back at that second year, I was like, well, I didn't eat there, and that delayed, I didn't eat when I should have eaten there. I ate something half an hour later, then half an hour later. So that actually was part of the reason why, potentially I could have got cramp, or I did sort of empty my resources, because my mind was on, oh my God, don't balls this up, not, Nick, you should have eaten at that point, or you need to be focused on what you need to do. So it really sort of opened a huge door for me with that.
Interesting. And do you remember at the time, were you quite taken aback at when you were practicing these skills in training? And I love the fact that that's what you've essentially said, is that I would work on these skills whilst training to improve them. Do you remember being quite taken aback at how much the mind would wander, and how much influence the mind had over your performance?
Yeah, like a huge amount, really. And you don't, until you sort of look into these things, I don't think you realise like how much of an impact it has. And you hear a lot of people talk about it, but until you actually go and practice it and try and change some things, you realise, actually I can, if I can focus on, being present from this road sign to that road sign, that means that when I go and do this really hard interval, I'm not worried about, the next one's going to be even harder, so I better back off. Subconsciously, that sometimes happens. It's actually, let's just focus on this. Let's put everything into this. You've got X amount of seconds or whatever. Really, really focus on that. And then when that's finished, then you relax, and then you can worry about the next one. So I found this, they didn't become physically easier, but I found I could get a better result. I hadn't changed anything physically, yet I was actually being able to, if it had 5 intervals, they'd all be at the top end of that bracket, if you like, as opposed to the first few being at the top and then them starting to drop off a bit. Like, that was within a couple of days, and I hadn't done anything physically to have changed that. So just altering a bit of like how you direct your mind, like, made a massive difference. And I was like, wow, if I carry on doing this, what will happen? And like I said, I actually went to that third year physically not as fit as the other years, but was in a completely different, like, psychological place, and it showed. And even when I said to my coach, he was like, I genuinely am surprised at that difference, because your numbers are way less than the first year. I was like, ta-da, there you go.
No, it's so interesting. And I think as coaches, and I've been a coach, I've been a golf coach, and we are so socialised through our education, and it's so natural. We're so socialised into outcome and performance, socialised into technique, socialised into physicality. And that's what we often talk about, and that's our first port of call. How's our technique? How's our physical ability? What's our physical ability like? And relating KPIs to those things, rather than, okay, those are there, absolutely, but from a baseline, what's the mentality like? Because if your focus of attention is all over the place, if you don't have the capacity to speak to yourself through tough periods, if there are somatic markers there that are going all over the place, there's tightness, this body is tense, the heart rate is up too much, we're over aroused, or whatever it might be, Nick, then if we don't have that baseline correct, then all of the physical side and all of the technical side, the performance side from that perspective can go out the window completely. But we're so socialised as coaches to look at those things first. And my hypothesis, and I'd like to get your feedback on this, is actually, as coaches, as participants, as competitors, if we actually hit the mindset first, and that's not to ignore the other areas, we hit the mindset first, get those right, and we know that we're flexible there, we're good there, we're positive there, then we can really be confident about working on the other areas, the technical, the physical, the tactical side of things.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've kind of thought about this quite a lot. And you know, if someone wants to become fitter or healthier, they'll quite happily go and work on, go down the gym, get a personal trainer and like improve themselves in that sense. But go and see a psychiatrist or anyone like that is not, that's to fix a problem, not to get better at something. And that again has sort of really interested me in terms of going through my masters. And I heard a really good analogy of it from I can't remember where it's from actually, but it was around people focus so much on the hardware and wanting to upgrade the hardware. If the software's not any good to go into that computer, it's never going to function to its full potential. And listening to your show and others, whenever you hear from like the world's best performers, they're all starting to do it. They're all starting to focus on the mental side of thing, and you hear it all the time. It's more of a mental thing, it's more of a mind thing than that. And these are, I talk to people at 24-hour races and they're like, 24-hour racing, there's a physical aspect to it, but then it's all a mental thing. And I'm like, well, there's loads of people here. I wonder how many of these people will train their mindset, and they'll go out and they'll physically train and they'll do all these rides and they'll do intervals and they'll try. I wonder how many of them will actually seek that out or actually try and develop that. And this is me making a guess on it. I'm pretty sure it's very, very low.
Yeah, because I think it's just it's either taken for granted or it's believed that it will improve as a consequence of training. Yeah, and so it's not executed, it's not practiced intentionally. So,
no, and that practice, that intentional practice, I think was it gave me a lot more. Like the self-awareness thing is huge now, and like in every setting, at home, at work, I'm way more self-aware of what I'm doing when I'm going into something. Is what I'm thinking like going to help me, or is it more of a maladaptive thought process that you get so hooked up on? Hang on a minute, Nick, you should be focusing on these next things, not, oh my God, I'm getting really nervous and all these sorts of things, and I don't want to balls it up, and hang on a minute, that's not useful. Let's think about something that is useful. Like I said, it's amazing how much it's kind of transferred over into other parts of my life.
I also think, Nick, that and I'll get you to think about this while reflecting on your cycling, it's a misunderstanding of how the brain and the nervous system are structured and how they function. People don't always realise, or people don't realise at all, that anxiety happens to us, distraction happens to us, uncertainty happens to us, vulnerability happens to us, and they can happen to us at any given time, irrespective of how fit we are, irrespective of how technically good we are, irrespective about how tactically adept we are. These soft skills happen to us at any given time. That's what our brain and nervous system are. Essentially, their job, a big part of their job, is a survival mechanism, and that can cause problems with how we function, especially in a high performing environment or when we want to high perform. So these things happen to us. So we can be cycling along, and suddenly we get distracted, or we focus on the wrong thing, or we become anxious, and in that moment we tighten up and we become tense, and that does all kinds of things to our self-talk, or our thinking, and our focus of concentration. It sounds to me that in that second year, that's what happened to you.
Yes, yeah, and again, after I came back from that second year and I started to look into all of this, and I'd do some races, and I'd be like, right, okay, let's try this out. And I'd noticed that within if my preparation wasn't very good going into it and I was a bit tired, I'd rock up and be like, no, my legs feel tired, this is going to be a rubbish race. And then that would be my trail of thought throughout that race. And lo and behold, my legs would be tighter. I wouldn't be able to get my heart rate up. And it was, I think it was when we did the thing on challenge and threat this year. And that really opened my eyes. We had to do this mental arithmetic thing. They used it with pilots with this experiment, and they basically flash these numbers up, and you got to add them up in your head, and they're spaced apart. And we did this in front of everyone. I literally remember sitting down and being like, oh my god, I am so in a threat state right now. I can't even add two of those numbers up. And we obviously went through it, and the physiological things, I was like, yes, like that has happened to me. I've gone to a race, something's happened, and I've been like, I don't think I've got the resources to be able to get through this, therefore straight into a threat state, and physiologically I did not function well. Whereas when I've gone into races and gone, I'm going to enjoy this, I'm going to have fun, in essence, I can do this, and I know I've got the resources to be able to get through it, I've had way better races. And I'm like, well, actually, I wasn't physically fitter in either of those two, but those triggers just had that physiological effect. And like you said, they are so intertwined. It just really, really amazed me. And it goes back to that software and hardware thing, that actually if we do really work on the software, not to say forget the hardware, but the software drives that hardware.
Absolutely. So year 3, you mentioned earlier that you reduced your time by 40 minutes. Obviously, 40 minutes off of the second year time. So when you recall your mindset, your state of mind throughout the race, and what you did everything go to plan mentally?
Did everything go to plan? When I was in the race, I didn't think it did, but when I reflect back, I was like, no, actually, because I had my markers and I knew what time I needed to get to for all those markers, and I can remember. So at the midway point is right at the top of the highest peaks. You, in theory, go along, you ride up to 50 mile point, which is super high, turn around at the top, and then come all the way back down. And I had in my head that I need to be. That's where I need to be at this time at that point. And they're all fine until I got to that midway point. And my midway point was slower than both 2 years. And straight away I had that, oh no, this isn't going how you're not going to do this. To which point I immediately sort of shifted down. I was like, actually, no, you've kept within your limits. You're riding within that. Actually, those first 2 years, this wasn't the point that the damage was done, or probably was. What actually happened is further on at mile 80 and 90 is when the wheels fell off. And actually, if you keep to this pace, you've worked it out, it's going to be fine. It's a few minutes off, but you feel good, you've done this, you know you can do it, and kind of continue with that mindset. So I felt the negativity sort of coming back to haunt me, and then that self-awareness, I was like, no, actually, this isn't going to help me. Even if I do come in slower, this thought process is not going to help me.
Yeah, so in my world, my terminology, I would say to you there, you did a great job at squashing the ant. Ant being an acronym for automatic negative thought.
Yes.
So you had an ant, or a series of ants, an ant farm, if you like, an ant infestation, and you squash those ants by using your self-talk. You talked to yourself, and that helped you then get back get your focus back on the task at hand and physically function towards your optimal capacity.
Yeah, and straight away it was, I'm at the top, I've got to get back down. Actually, I need to focus on what you need to do, which is get down this mountain whilst avoiding people that are still riding up, because it's an out and back. So you're riding back down, people are still coming back up. You need to take it easy on the descent. I need to eat something on this descent. You could, like, your race could be over if you slide out on this and crash. That's it. So let's focus on what you've got to do, which is get down here, get to the next feed, then make sure you eat something. And that ant squashing process, you could have said I was an ant farmer the year before, but
yes.
that it had a huge impact. And at the time, I don't think I realised. I knew it was what I needed to do, but I didn't realise actually. I reflecting on it, I actually did it quite well, and it worked, because I then maintained that and made sure I carried on eating, made sure I carried on focusing on my race plan, if you like, not on everything else that's going on around me, and managed to get it done.
If you were to go back and do the Leadville 100, is there anything else that you'd incorporate in? Would you do you feel you could do even better from a time perspective as a consequence of doing more things or different things, or improving what you did do with the psych side? So yeah, my wife and my parents probably would be like, "Oh, you're going to go back again?" I probably would go back again. Yeah.
Just because it's a fantastic event, and it really it makes you realise what people are actually capable of. Like, there are people that do this. The first year I did it, I got beaten by a 78-year-old guy, and I was 34, 35. Got beaten by a 78-year-old guy. There are people with like amputees that have got legs missing, and just this whole array of people that it just literally fascinates me. So there is a thing where actually I think I would go back. Would I do it again? 100%. Would I want to try some different things? I'd probably want to expand on what I did, and by no means do I think I'm any good at this stuff. Actually, I'm still I'll still ride to work and my mind will be off wandering and doing all this stuff, and I'll have a training ride where I'm like, what I'm thinking about is the next interval, and it's almost this constant work on doing it, really, because it's not like it turns off. You don't get off your bike. Well, when you do get off your bike, you're not cycling, but you get off your bike and your mind's still going. Like, it's a 24, well, apart from when you're asleep, it's always something that you're working on. So it's just a constant, I think. So yeah, there's definitely things I could go back and do more of. But the interesting thing is that the first year I did it, I still now can't fathom how people do the run.
Right.
And I don't understand. The cut-off's 36 hours. And the winner does it. The winner last year did it in 17. And I can't get my head around that. But there's a little bit of me that's like, wow, I wonder what if? And I by no way, I started running like a month ago as something a bit different to do because I'm time restrained with the kids. But there's more. I think it's just trying to work out what works with you and then pushing yourself a little bit further. That side of things really interests me because the capacity people have is incredible.
It is, isn't it? I mean, I'm very much a recreational runner, and I do sort of 5Ks, the very occasional 10K, and I'm just, in my middle years of life, trying to stay fit and do the right thing, and try and look athletic for my clients, basically, who look far more athletic than me. But I honestly do look at people's times and say that the 10K, and I suppose I look at times in the 5,000 meters, the 5K, and you think, wow, how do human beings actually achieve those times? And I'm not even talking about the guys at the very, very top, because obviously they're the best in the world, and they do the most incredible times. Well, I'm just thinking, well, I would just have to. I certainly can't sustain a sprint for that long, but that would feel like absolutely sprinting for 5,000 meters, which is just insane. But even people, recreational runners, who just do these incredible times, I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. And what's really interesting is they do the Leadville's basically a series, and they do like a marathon earlier in the year. They do a 50-mile run and a bike. They do the 100-mile bike. The day after the 100-mile bike, there's a 10K, and then the week after, there's a 100-mile run. And there's this thing called the Lead Man or Lead Woman, and you enter all events, and you have to do every single one within the cutoff. And so I remember coming in with this woman that last year when I got the time I wanted to. This woman came in with me, and she was doing the Lead Woman, so she had to do the 10K the day after and do the run the following week. And I'm just like, how do you train for something like that? How do you get to the point where you think mentally I can do this, and then physically go and do it as well? Because you've got so many points where doubt can enter your mind, even in a 50-mile bike ride, and no, I can't do this, and all of these things, and yet they literally just keep on going through it. It amazes me. And most of them aren't professionals that are doing all of them, because a professional biker will do just the bike, a professional runner will do the run. So the people that are doing all of them, for want of a better phrase, like normal people that have a day job, which it's amazing.
Yeah, and talking about that day job, I just wanted to talk to you for 5 minutes before we finish about your day job. And you're doing this master's degree in sports psychology, so not only are you interested in sports psychology and the psychological side of competing, but you're actually doing some qualifications in this area, and I know that we've spoken offline about how that's impacted your day-to-day job, not just, I suppose, for yourself within your work, but also, you're head of learning and development, so there's going to be a big part of this. So tell me a little bit about that. Have your views changed on these things? How much of this do you bring into the workplace for yourself and for others, I suppose, at Evans Cycles?
Yeah, so I suppose it's been over the last, since September last year when I started doing this, that just that the bits that there's a lot of things that we'll go through in the master's degree, and the bit more in the applied part of it really, which is having the meetings with people and reflective listening and things like that, and making people more self-aware. Like we're sitting in some sessions that we run, and there might be stuff on leadership or anything like that, and getting people to reflect on what they've done previously. And I use that now with I use it with my team and be like, so you ran that session last week. When you reflect on that, not that wasn't very good, I better not do that again. Yeah, I've reflected on it in the car on the way home. Actually, no, what did work? What didn't work? Because there's always some good things, and we're very good at picking the bad things up and not necessarily what was good. And then, okay, so what would you do differently? It sounds very simple when you do it, but sitting there and going, how did that make you feel? Why didn't that work? Why did that work? Why did you not get that response? All of those things. And then, so what would you do differently next time? I'd probably do this, this, and this. That's fantastic. So how are you going to make that happen? What are the things you're going to do to be able to do that? And then, lo and behold, when they come and do it again, they're like, oh my God, that was 1,000 times better. Whereas if they just sat there and gone, that wasn't in the car home. Damn it, I forgot that. I didn't do that. I better do that next time. I won't do that next time. Carry on driving, think of something else. Actually writing it down and all these sorts of things, and we bring it into group discussions as well. So that's one example where it's helped massively, and that there are so many others as well. And I'm learning constantly that the world of the business and organisational world, and there is a link with cycling as well. So I have conversations with the marketing team, and they're looking at how they get more people riding bikes and all these sorts of things. And there's things that are going on in my degree, and I'm like, oh, hang on a minute, if that's what you're trying to get at, and actually what they want is something completely different, have you guys thought of that? And I'm finding there's more and more links, which is actually amazing me, because I was all actually sports psychology. I'd love to get into more of the elite sport. Actually, if we can probably get more people riding bikes, like, that's going to impact way more people there. There's huge impacts there. But telling them everyone knows they need to probably get fitter, and riding a bike is probably quite good, but there are so many people that don't, or they buy a bike and it sits in the shed and never comes out. So the link between the two, if you like, is getting, it's spreading hugely. And then I'm at a point where I'm like, right, actually, what route do I want to go down with this? So I've got another year of it, which is it's just really exciting.
There's a huge participation piece attached to sports psychology, whether that's around motivation, engagement, whatever it might be. So yeah. I completely agree. And I know that many people who listen into the Sports Psych Show would be interested to tease your mind further about your experiences in the Leadville, or experiences utilising sports psychology within a business setting. So, Nick, how can people get hold of you?
So I'm on all the social medias. I wouldn't say I use them massively. I think it's just I'm getting old. So I'm on Twitter, and it's at Nick Coley. I'm on Instagram as well. It's become less bikes and more family orientated, shall we say, and that's just Coleymeister on Instagram, Facebook, and then I'm happy for anyone to contact me at work, nick.coley@evancycles.com. More than happy. I like a good chat.
So do we all. Well, Nick, that was awesome. It was really fascinating to hear about your experiences in endurance sport and the impact that sports psychology has made, the positive impact. So, look, Nick, thanks so much for your time today.
No, thank you very much. It's been great.
Well, I really enjoyed that podcast, and I'd love to hear what you, the listener, thinks. So please do get in touch via Twitter or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think of the Sports Psych Show. And if you do have any suggestions for different formats or future guests, I'd be delighted to hear them. I'm really looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.